From homeless black man to millionaire, the inspiring journey amid Elon Musk and Donald Trump. David Miller's name shimmered on every tech billboard from San Francisco to New York. The guy supposedly went from nothing, like literally sleeping on cold streets, to building a fortune that outpaced some of the world's richest. Headlines screamed it like a blockbuster. From homeless black man to millionaire, the inspiring journey amid Elon Musk and Donald Trump. But nobody really knew the storm behind the smile. It all stared back at him the other day, blinking from an old, worn photo that slipped into his philanthropy mail. The picture was faded, and it hit him like a punch. There, sitting on a cracked sidewalk, eyes wide but hollow, was Michael, David's childhood friend, the one who vanished into the shadows while David climbed skyscrapers and shook hands with CEOs. That photo wasn't just a memory. It was a broken mirror. Michael's head was tilted, fingers wrapped around an empty. A city street buzzed behind him, San Francisco's heartbeat, but Michael looked like he didn't belong anywhere. David's stomach twisted, his heart thudded, and his hands trembled when he looked closer. They grew up in the same block, kicking cans, dreaming big under a sun that gleamed on both their hopeful faces. But now, life had carved paths as opposite as night and day. And here it was again. Michael's face, raw and real, and David, a king in a glass tower, adored for his vision and social mission. The truth clawed at him. David had one chance, a meeting, face to face, and it shook him. Michael was alive, but there was anger baked deep in his gaze. A storm David had tried to outrun for years. The old hurts, the silent betrayals, the chasm life had opened between them, all boiled up like lava ready to explode. But right when things got fragile, the shadows stirred. Jonathan, David's rival, a cold shark who watched and waited. Word was, Jonathan had dug up Michael's existence like a loaded weapon. He wanted to shatter David's flawless image, to drag everything down with dirtier stories hidden in that photo, the kind the media would devour like vultures. Rumors rippled, cameras lurked, whispers sliced through boardrooms. David's life stood on a knife's edge. Now David sat at a crossroads, his chest tight, voice hoarse from sleepless nights. Should he risk everything by embracing Michael? Should he open doors long slammed shut to face his guilt, his failures? Or should he protect the sleek legend, carefully crafted by years of sweat and silence? Suddenly, a new twist hit like thunder. Something unexpected, a move that pulled David deeper into this mess, threatening to drown him in waves of old. David's hard-earned empire trembled, the past and present colliding. And just like that, the photo wasn't just a photo anymore. It was a ticking time bomb. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important warning. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube removed their subscriptions without notice. Take a quick look at the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I don't want you to miss any exclusive content that's coming. And since you're here, drop a powerful like that really helps me with the algorithm. Oh, and let me know in the comments, what city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's interact. David's heart raced. Questions swirled like leaves caught in a storm. Should he reach out to Michael, let the world see the truth? Or should he silence everything, bury the past, and protect the empire he'd built? Just then, his phone buzzed violently on the table, a jarring sound that sliced through his thoughts. He reached for it, fingers trembling. The screen flashed, an unknown number. Confusion flooded him. Did he need to answer? The anxiety hit like a wave, crashing over his resolve. A heavy sigh escaped as he hit accept. Hello? His voice felt ragged, as if it carried the weight of his decisions. Mr. Miller? The voice on the other end was shaky but urgent. You need to come to the shelter on 5th Street. Right now. Who is this? Panic fluttered in his chest. This could be a trap. Another trick from Jonathan. Please, it's important. It's about Michael. The name struck him like ice water. What happened? David's words came out sharp. Just come. The line went dead. David felt pulled, like a puppet on a string. Memories flooded back, the laughter, the dreams, the promises of better days shared under sunlit skies. What if Michael needed him? What if this was the last chance to make things right? He bolted from his sleek office, the corridors of glass and steel feeling suddenly foreign. Each step felt heavier, every heartbeat closer to the truth he'd long ignored. The city buzzed with life around him, but it felt distant. When he arrived at the shelter, a run-down building cloaked in shadows, the air felt thick. He pushed through the door, and the musty smell hit him like a punch. A small crowd gathered, their whispers a low hum, eyes darting to the back of the room. And there was Michael, looking different. Haggard but fierce, anger radiating off him. David's stomach twisted. Was it shame or sorrow he felt? Maybe both. Michael, David called, voice wobbling. The crowd turned, stares heavy with judgment. Michael's gaze snapped to him, firing like 1,000 arrows. David, you came! His voice cracked, but there was no warmth, only a storm brewing. What's going on? David asked, stepping closer, urgency spilling into every word. Michael's lips curled into a bitter smile. You don't even know, do you? Then the door flung open and Jonathan strolled in, a smirk plastered across his face. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, entirely too pleased. Looks like the real show is just starting, he sneered. Before David could react, a commotion erupted. A woman burst through, the shelter's director, pale and wide-eyed, clutching a crumpled piece of paper. I can't believe it! She exclaimed, breathless, staring at Michael with a mix of fear and disbelief. How could you hide this? What are you talking about? David felt the world tilt beneath his feet. Michael isn't just a homeless man. He has a history, a family that... Jonathan laughed, cutting her off. Oh, this is rich. You thought you were the one helping him. Turns out, he has connections that could topple your precious empire. The room fell silent as the truth thudded heavily in the air. David's mind raced. Michael a connected man? What did that mean? Shocked whispers surged through the crowd. Michael's expression morphed, a mixture of pain and satisfaction. You never asked, David. You just assumed. The intensity gripped David's heart. Everything he thought he knew was crumbling. He stared at Michael, the old anger now mingling with a potential he'd never seen. David's whole world shifted. What would he do now? Fight to hold on to the life he'd built, or confront a past that could destroy more than just their friendship? As Michael leaned closer, a dangerous fire glistening in his eyes, David knew there was no turning back. The room hummed like a live wire, the tension palpable. This wasn't just a meeting. This was the beginning of something much larger. The photo wasn't a time bomb. It was a signal flaring, the past and future colliding, leaving David standing on the edge of a precipice. And the question loomed, heavy and ominous. What had Michael truly unleashed? David's heart hammered as he stared at the photo, the weight of the moment hanging between him and Michael like a storm cloud. Just when he thought he knew which way to turn, a sudden noise jolted him from his thoughts. A shout, a scream. Outside, chaos erupted. David rushed to the window, fear bubbling in his throat. People were running, their faces twisted in terror. Sirens wailed, drowning out the city sounds. "What the hell?" His voice barely escaped as he squinted down at the street. Through the frenetic scenes, something caught his eye. A black van skidding around the corner. It barreled towards the small crowd gathering on the corner where Michael often hung out. Time slowed. David's breath caught. He didn't need to see the driver's face to know. He felt it in his bones. Jonathan, lurking with a wicked grin. The kind he wore when he was hunting for blood. But this wasn't just a game anymore. This was different. David's legs surged to life. He burst through his office door, flew down the stairs, and threw himself into the street, hearing only a heartbeat in his ears. "Michael!" he shouted, voice cracking as he shoved through the mass of people. Hands gripped him, attempting to hold him back, but he shoved harder. Fear coursed through him. What if Michael didn't see it coming? What if Jonathan? The van screeched to a stop, tires smoking, and moments later, a figure bolted out. Not Jonathan. It was Michael. His empty cup flew from his hands, shattering on the ground. David's heart dropped. Michael stood frozen, eyes wild, like a deer caught in headlights. The crowd screamed again, panic rising like a wave. But then Michael's face shifted. What was once grief morphed into anger. He pointed, "Get back! Get back!" And then David saw it. Flashes of metal, the unmistakable glint of a gun. He cursed, adrenaline surging. Jonathan hadn't just come to smear his reputation. He had unleashed something darker. David's throat dried, his palms clammy. In that moment, everything blurred. The lines separating friend and foe, past and present, shifted like shadows. Michael charged, fueled by a rage that radiated from him. "You think you can just forget me? You think you can erase me?" David stumbled, confusion crashing over him. "Michael, no!" he yelled, desperation ringing in his voice. But it was too late. Rage ignited, and something inside Michael snapped. Jonathan had stepped forward, smirking, a match in the dark. "You were never gonna make it out of here clean, David. Let's see how this plays out." His words dripped with malice. Suddenly, a shot rang out, a deafening crack that pierced through the... Michael fell. Everything froze. The world shifted into sharp clarity. A gasp echoed through the crowd as eyes widened. Disbelief and horror etched on every face. Was this all a carefully orchestrated game? A trap set for a king on a fragile chessboard? David's vision blurred with fear. He reached for Michael, but the crowd surged back, whispers of shock swirling around him. "Michael!" David's voice cracked, but the body was crumpled, too still. A darkness wrapped around them, pulling tighter. In that breathless moment, as sirens wailed and chaos swirled, David realized everything he believed about himself, about Michael, about Jonathan, might just be riddled with lies. And in the middle of it all, a single question echoed. Who was David Miller without his empire? The photo, a simple image, had morphed into something monstrous. A countdown to the truth buried beneath layers of silence and shadow. What now? The answer was lost in the chaos. David's heart hammered as he stared at the photo, the weight of the moment hanging between him and Michael like a storm cloud. Just when he thought he knew which way to turn, a sudden noise jolted him from his thoughts. A shout! A scream! Outside, chaos erupted. David rushed to the window, fear bubbling in his throat. People were running, their faces twisted in terror. Sirens wailed, drowning out the city sounds. What the hell? His voice barely escaped as he squinted down at the street. Through the frenetic scenes, something caught his eye. A black van skidding around the corner. It barreled towards the small crowd, gathering where Michael often hung out. Time slowed. David's breath caught. He didn't need to see the driver's face to know. He felt it in his bones. Jonathan, lurking with a wicked grin, the kind he wore when he was hunting for blood. But this wasn't just a game anymore. This was different. David's legs surged to life. He burst through his office door, flew down the stairs, and threw himself into the street, hearing only a heartbeat in his ears. "Michael!" he shouted, voice cracking as he shoved through the mass of people. Hands gripped him, attempting to hold him back, but he shoved harder. Fear coursed through him. What if Michael didn't see it coming? What if Jonathan? The van screeched to a stop, tires smoking, and moments later, a figure bolted out. Not Jonathan, it was Michael. His empty cup flew from his hands, shattering on the ground. David's heart dropped. Michael stood frozen, eyes wild, like a deer caught in headlights. The crowd screamed again, panic rising like a wave. But then, Michael's face shifted. What was once grief morphed into anger. He pointed. "Get back! Get back!" And then David saw it. Flashes of metal, the unmistakable glint of a gun. He cursed, adrenaline surging. In that moment, everything blurred. The lines separating friend and foe, past and present, shifted like shadows. Michael charged, fueled by a rage that radiated from him. "You think you can just forget me? You think you can erase me?" David stumbled, confusion crashing over him. "Michael, no!" he yelled, desperation ringing in his voice. But it was too late. Rage ignited, and something inside Michael snapped. Jonathan had stepped forward, smirking, a match in the dark. "You were never going to make it out of here clean, David. Let's see how this plays out." His words dripped with malice. Suddenly, a shot rang out, a deafening crack that pierced through the chaos. David's heart stopped. Michael fell. Everything froze. The world shifted into sharp clarity. A gasp echoed through the crowd as eyes widened. Disbelief and horror etched on every face. Was this all a carefully orchestrated game? A trap set for a king on a fragile chessboard? David's vision blurred with fear. He reached for Michael, but the crowd surged back, whispers of shock swirling around him. Michael, David's voice cracked, but the body was crumpled, too still. A darkness wrapped around them, pulling tighter. As sirens wailed and chaos swirled, David's head spun. Something was wrong. Wrong in a way that made his skin crawl. Michael's lips moved. They were almost in sync. He looked alive, just barely, but something about his glare felt wrong. So deeply wrong. Before he knew it, David was pulling back, searching for answers in the crowd's panic-stricken faces. Then, among them, an elderly woman stepped forward. David's heart raced faster. She had a crumpled envelope in hand, and as she opened it, a slip fell out, a newspaper clipping from years ago. Gasps erupted around him. The headline read, "Tech CEO's sons found dead following family scandal." "Your sons," she croaked, her voice thick with emotion. "They didn't just die, did they?" The world twisted again, reality fracturing. Confusion scrunched David's brow. "What are you talking about?" "Their deaths weren't an accident. It was all connected. They were looking for Michael." Her words sank into the crowd's murmur. David's stomach twisted violently. Connections he'd never understood were forming in the shadow of pain. Jonathan leaned against the wall, eyes glinting with a challenge. "Surprise, David! It seems you've been living a lie, hiding far more than you knew." Suddenly, Michael's eyes flickered open. They flashed with that same anger mingled with a knowing sadness. "You were the one who chose power over truth, David." He staggered to his feet, and the crowd gasped again. The truth bared its claws, sharp and terrifying. Everything David thought he knew shattered like glass. Secrets unraveled, lives entwined, and suddenly the past wasn't just a burden, it was a ticking time bomb of betrayal and horror. What had Michael truly unleashed? As he stared at the wreckage of his life, David's heart raced, the weight of the photo still pressing down on him, a chilling reminder of his past. In that moment, sitting on the edge of uncertainty, he felt the world tilt. Redemption danced just out of reach, while survival tugged at his sleeve, an unrelenting hand. Suddenly, a cacophony of sirens, blaring horns, and distant shouts pierced the San Francisco air. The sound erupted like thunder, shaking him from his thoughts. David looked around, pulse quickening. His mind flashed to Michael, face tense with anger. What was happening? In an instant, his phone buzzed violently on the table. He snatched it up, eyes darting to the screen. The news alert blared ominously. David Miller's past exposed, shocking secrets uncovered. His breath caught in his throat. He opened the app, and what he saw sent his world spiraling. A video clip had surfaced, grainy but unmistakable. It showed a younger David, barely out of his teens, surrounded by a different crowd, rough, wild-eyed men laughing under flickering streetlights. Was that Michael in the background? David squinted, searching faces, but there was more. Drugs scattered on the table, money exchanging hands. This was a world he thought he had escaped. No, this couldn't be real. He felt the ground shift under him like a sinking ship. When had he ever crossed that line? Panic clawed at his chest as the video continued. In shaky footage, David shouted, his younger self animated, full of bravado. "We'll make it! We'll own this city!" The words echoed in his head like a sinister chant. David's stomach twisted. This wasn't just a moment frozen in time. It was a confession, a brand on his soul. The comments flooded in, a toxic tide of judgment. Fake millionaire. He built his empire on lies. What else is hidden? He slammed the phone down trembling. How could he face Michael? Would Michael bring this to the media's doorstep? Would Jonathan, the lurking shark, capitalize on this scoop to dismantle everything David had built? He felt cornered, gasping for air as external chaos seeped inside, every sound morphing into a sharp reminder of his greatest fear. Then there was the echo of Michael's anger, simmering and sharp. David had built walls around his past, shutting out the darkness. But everything felt so close now, too real to ignore. He remembered their childhood, the laughter beneath the sun, the dreams that had seemed so innocent. Why hadn't he reached out to Michael sooner? Sudden footsteps charged into the room, startling him. His assistant, Clara, stood there, wide-eyed. "David, they're broadcasting it live! We need to respond!" Her words tumbled out, panic dancing in her voice, urgency thrumming in the air. A knock broke the tension, a harsh, deliberate sound. David looked up, dread pooling in his gut. It was Jonathan, smirking, ready to deliver the death blow. In that moment, the walls seemed to close in. A ticking clock filled with the echo of questions. What would he say? Would he defend or deny? And then, as the door creaked open, revealing Jonathan's smug face, the ground beneath David shifted again. Another figure loomed behind Jonathan, and the staggered breath of disbelief escaped his lips. Michael? The weight of that word hung heavy, an avalanche waiting to crash. The past, the choices, everything collided, and David could feel it all trembling at the edges. Would Michael stand with him or against him? The photo had transformed from memory into a weapon, a reminder of all that led him here. The storm brewed furious in his chest. Secrets, lies, and friendships turned sharp-edged. What would happen next? David's heart raced, pounding in his chest like a trapped animal. The air crackled with tension as he faced Michael, the decades of separation hanging thick between them. Guilt clawed at him, but he steeled himself, wanting to reach out, to bridge the gap. When Michael spoke, his voice was rough, like gravel slipping through clenched hands. "Why now, David?" Michael's eyes flared with anger. "You think a photo can wipe the slate clean? You think you can just walk back in and pretend everything is fine?" David swallowed hard. The weight of the moment pressed down on him. "I'm here to help, Michael. Before he could finish, a deafening crash cut through the alley, making both men jump. A sleek black sedan skidded to a stop nearby, tires screeching against the asphalt. Windows tinte d'arco, las doors flew abiertas, y tres figuras salieron en toda corriendo, como una paja de lobos hunting. Deshácense embebido, entregando a Michael detrás de un gásel. El sonido de guerra fundió el aire, arrastrando del titánico del Nietzsche lobo. Balas el aire fauste, y el parete salió por el concreto. El pánico surgió entre él. Secreto convertido. El pensamiento se esnacó por mientras. ¿Qué está pasando, Michael? Voz del perseguido llenaban fuerte, gritos acecaban. No sé. David sclimbiata, adrenalina recorriendo hacia él. Podía sentir las vibraciones del caos a todo alrededor. Gente gritando, caos desgranándose como un olámemo. Pero entonces, con tal apreciación, el perro desapareció. El silencio envolvió a ellos. Un tacto rápido. Corazón adrenalinas frente a su hombro. Dijo You, gritando. Declara sin querer confiar ser recompensado. El figuro barquió, puntando a David. Sabemos quiénes sones. Sabemos qué has hecho. Michael grinned, stepping out. The defiance in his voice was like a lifeline in the chaos. Whatever you want, he's not involved. The figure laughed darkly, a cruel sound that echoed down the alley. Oh, he's involved all right. Not just him. You too, Michael. David's world spun. What did they mean? The confusion was suffocating, and fear twisted his gut. But it was too late for explanations. Suddenly, the men advanced, and in a flash of movement, one of them lunged toward Michael, grabbing him by the collar. You owe us, and we're here to collect. That's when everything changed. Michael's face contorted, not with fear, but with a dark resolve. I thought I could outrun it, he breathed, meeting David's wide eyes with a chilling clarity. But it's back, like a shadow that never left. And just like that, David's mind shattered. Memories spun like a tornado. Whispers of old debts, choices made in desperation, a past he thought he'd left behind. He felt the ground beneath him quake. Who was Michael really? In that moment, the photo took on a new meaning. No longer just a memory. It became a window into a life drenched in secrets. And he realized the truth. Everything he believed about his old friend was crumbling away. Michael. David's voice fell to a whisper as uncertainty gripped him. What had he really walked back into? The figure tightened the grip, pulling Michael closer, and David's world swayed dangerously. As sirens wailed in the distance, pulling closer to the chaos, he knew he couldn't escape. Not now. In the heart of the storm, one haunting question rose above the rest. How deep did Michael's ties to the shadows go? The answer loomed, dark and menacing, wrapping around David's chest like a vice. The past had returned to reclaim what it felt was owed. David's heart raced, a wild drumbeat echoing through the walls of his meticulously crafted empire. The photo lay heavy in his hands, a reminder that the world outside his glittering life was anything but safe. Should he reach out to Michael? The weight of the past hung thick, suffocating him. Then, in that stillness, a commotion erupted outside his office. People froze. Faces turned towards the glass doors, surprised and wide-eyed. Someone screamed. David bolted upright, instinct pulling him into action. He rushed to the window, and what he saw sent a jolt through him. A crowd gathered in the street, shouting, pointing. It was chaos, fists in the air, anger boiling over. And then a flash of blue and red lights illuminated the scene. Police cars. As the sirens wailed, panic set in. And then, out of the corner of his eye, he caught a flicker of movement. Michael. He was there, but not in the way David had envisioned. Michael stood on a raised platform, a makeshift soapbox, yelling into a megaphone. His anger was palpable, his voice slicing through the noise. You want the truth? We're more than just stories. They're all watching us. David's stomach dropped. This was no ordinary protest. This felt personal. Michael was staring straight at him, challenging him, demanding to be seen. The past bubbled to the surface like boiling water. Old wounds, old debts owed, everything raw and exposed. David felt exposed too, his carefully spun image at risk of unraveling. He couldn't just stand by. But before he could decide, a flash of movement unfolded in the crowd. Someone threw something. A bottle? Crashing against the brick wall nearby. The sound was thunderous, like an explosion. The police surged forward, pushing back the crowd. Tension thickened, soaring higher with every heartbeat. David's eyes darted back to Michael. This was more than a protest now. It was a storm, and Michael was at the very center. Had he stirred something more than just anger? Had he unleashed the buried secrets of their youth? Just then, he saw it. A figure whispered urgently to Michael. Their heads close together. David squinted, his breath hitching. It was Jonathan. A sense of dread washed over him. Was Jonathan the puppet master behind this? Michael's shout rang clearer now, outlining a shared history. They took everything from us. We were the forgotten ones. Look where they are, and where we are. His words carried a weight that knocked the air out of David's lungs. How many shared that burden? How many carried similar stories, poised to shatter his illusions? Out of the chaos, David felt a surge of urgency. Was Michael being used, or was this his own fight? Suddenly, the world shifted. The desire for redemption clashed with self-preservation. David's carefully honed legacy teetered on the brink of catastrophe. And then, an explosion of sound. Fireworks? No, a deafening crash. Glass shattered nearby, sending shards into the air. The crowd screamed. People scattered. David's heart raced. Everything came crashing into chaos. The photo slipped from David's fingers, fluttering down like a fallen leaf. It landed at his feet, the image still haunting. The echoes of the crowd surged louder and louder, drowning out everything else. The path ahead was no longer clear. In that moment, he felt something shift inside him. A flicker of hope tangled with fear. What awaited him on the other side of that chaos? Would facing Michael bring him healing? Or would it bury him deeper in the lies he'd spun? Everything hung in the balance. Could he stand strong, or would the truth he tried so hard to bury finally come crawling back to the surface? A shiver of uncertainty settled in the pit of his stomach, and he felt the world spinning out of control. David's heart raced, the weight of the photo still pressing down on him. A chilling reminder of his past. In that moment, sitting on the edge of uncertainty, he felt the world tilt. Redemption danced just out of reach, while survival tugged at his sleeve, an unrelenting hand. Suddenly, a cacophony of sirens, blaring horns, and distant shouts pierced the air. The sound erupted like thunder, shaking him from his thoughts. David looked around, pulse quickening. His mind flashed to Michael, face tense with anger. What was happening? In an instant, his phone buzzed violently on the table. He snatched it up, eyes darting to the screen. The news alert blared ominously. David Miller's past exposed, shocking secrets uncovered. His breath caught in his throat. He opened the app, and what he saw sent his world spiraling. A video clip had surfaced, grainy but unmistakable. It showed a younger David, barely out of his teens, surrounded by rough men, laughing under flickering streetlights. Was that Michael in the background? David squinted, searching faces. But there was more. Drugs scattered on the table, money exchanging hands. This was a world he thought he had escaped. No, this couldn't be real. He felt the ground shift under him, like a sinking ship. When had he ever crossed that line? Panic clotted his chest as the video continued. In shaky footage, David shouted, his younger self animated and full of bravado. "We'll make it! We'll own this city!" The words echoed in his head like a sinister chant. David's stomach twisted. This wasn't just a moment frozen in time. It was a confession. Comments flooded in, a toxic tide of judgment. Fake millionaire. He built his empire on lies. What else is hidden? Just then, a flash of movement interrupted his thoughts. Light flickered wildly from the crowd outside, illuminating the surrounding chaos. A faint cry escaped David's lips as he rushed back to the window. He could hardly comprehend what he saw. A figure stood atop the platform, lit up in harsh light. Michael! David felt breathless. What was Michael doing? But then it hit him. The crowd wasn't just there. They were chanting, "Justice for Michael!" They yelled, their voices uniting powerfully. For a moment, David's heart soared, until he spotted something that made it plummet. Amidst the chaos, a shadowy figure appeared from the van that had arrived earlier. Jonathan's henchman, guns drawn, stepped forward. "No!" David shouted, lunging for the door, desperation surging. He had to protect Michael. But as he raced into the street, a deafening boom echoed in the air. The ground shook. David looked up, frozen in shock. Explosions of color shattered the night sky. Fireworks? But no, this wasn't a celebration. It was chaos. The crowd gasped, faces blanching in fear. David's heart raced as he turned toward the sound, just in time to see a figure in the crowd stumble and fall. A loud gasp erupted, drowning out the shouts. "It's Jonathan!" someone screamed, pointing toward the chaos. David's blood ran cold. The figure rolling on the ground was Jonathan, clutching his stomach, another dark shadow looming over him. As the crowd backed away, gasping, David felt the air still. But who was that? Before he could process, the crowd parted, revealing the source of the attack. A woman, terrifyingly familiar. It was Vanessa, Jonathan's supposed ally, fury etched on her face. "You thought you could silence him?" she yelled, her voice fierce and unwavering. "You were wrong!" David blinked, confusion swirling in his mind. Vanessa? This didn't make sense. Why was she here? Everything spiraled like a whirlwind as the pieces began to connect. "David, run!" Michael shouted, shoving through the crowd toward him, urgency on his face. But it was too late. Vanessa lifted her weapon, arm steady, eyes locked on Michael. "Don't move!" she screamed. Time slowed. David's heart raced. He had thought he understood the stakes, but everything had shifted. Did Jonathan betray them both? Was this all an elaborate setup? As Vanessa squeezed the trigger, a deafening explosion rattled the air. And just like that, everything shattered. David felt the world darken around him as he screamed, hopelessly reaching out. The ground seemed to vanish beneath him. What had just happened? Who was truly on whose side? As the darkness swallowed him whole, one thing became painfully clear. The fight was just beginning. David felt the shockwave crash over him as he lunged toward Michael, fearing the worst. A blinding flash erupted from the gun. Time stretched thin like a fragile thread ready to snap. He heard the deafening crack, felt the rush of air, and instinct screamed for him to move. But before he could react, everything went dark. In a blink, the ground rushed up to meet him. But instead of pain, he felt a sudden stillness, like being swallowed whole by a vast silence. Pulses of warmth fluttered from his chest into the depths of his body, carving an unexpected path through the chaos. Then, amidst the darkness, a voice called out, "David!" It was Michael, but this time the anger was gone, replaced by a crack that echoed through the emptiness. "You need to wake up." Eyes darting open, David gasped, back firm against his office wall. He was alone, sweat dripping down his brow, disoriented by a vivid memory, one he hadn't fully grasped until now. The photo, the truth, it all rushed back in fragments, gnawing at his mind. But just as the memory settled, a new noise intruded. Echoing footsteps. They echoed through the silence, heavy and slow, like thunder rolling across the landscape. David clutched his chest, heart racing. He strained his ears, desperate to catch a whisper, a hint of the approaching intruder. "David?" The voice was softer now, familiar but haunting. "Where are you?" Before David could respond, the door creaked open. There stood Clara, wide-eyed and pale. "You need to see this," she whispered, urgency pouring from her. They're saying Michael shot Jonathan." Time froze again. The words hung in the air, sharp and jagged like shattered glass. David's mind was a flurry of confusion. "What? No, that's impossible. Look!" Clara thrust her phone at him, her hands shaking. The screen flickered to life, revealing a live news feed. There, on the screen, Michael stood under blinding lights, flanked by police, hands raised in surrender. Panic filled David's veins as he watched the chaos unfold. "They're treating him like a criminal," David shouted, clenching his fists. "This can't be happening!" But as Clara stepped closer, her eyes glistening with fear, the screen shifted again. A different angle appeared, revealing Jonathan sprawled on the ground, blood pooling around him. But that wasn't all. A second figure loomed in the shadows, obscured but unmistakable. Vanessa, her face twisted in a sinister grin. "No, no, no!" David felt ice slip into his veins, a visceral dread washing over him. Why was she there? What role did she play? As if reading his thoughts, Clara's voice trembled. What if she set this up? Heart pounding, David stared at the screen, swallowing hard. This was never about Michael. This was about something deeper. The live feed shifted again, wider, showing a crowd forming, voices rising in uproar. The weight of the moment crashed down on him. David thought he had it all figured out, but now the ground beneath him felt like shifting sand. And then, as the camera zoomed in on Michael's face, something clicked in David's mind. a memory that had lingered long enough to flourish into clarity. A clandestine meeting, late-night whispers, promises of untold power. It was all connected, David breathed. Michael was trying to expose Jonathan's lies. Just then, a sudden noise shattered his thoughts. An urgent knock, followed by a familiar voice. "David, we don't have much time." It was Michael, breaking through the shadows, wild-eyed and desperate. "No!" David shouted. "You shouldn't be here." But Michael stepped closer, eyes blazing, a mixture of determination and terror. "You have to understand. I was never just a pawn, David. This whole thing was just a game, and I'm not the only one who played." David froze, confusion spiraling in a whirlpool of doubt. "What do you mean?" Before Michael could answer, a scream ripped through the crowd outside. David felt a jolt, something monumental approaching, a truth hiding beneath layers of deceit. Everything he thought he knew was suddenly cast into doubt. The news channel blared on. Breaking news. Shocking revelations surrounding technology tycoon David Miller. David's mind raced. The ground beneath him was crumbling, realities shifting like sand. What had Michael unleashed? And how would this change everything they thought they knew? David stood frozen, his heart pounding against his ribs. He had come here to confront the ghosts of his past, but it felt like the weight of the world hung heavy on his shoulders. Michael's glance flickered between fear and fire, a raw reminder of everything they had lost. "David, we have to act fast. This isn't just about us anymore." Michael's voice trembled with urgency, cutting through the chaos, grounding David in the moment. A lump formed in David's throat. "I never wanted any of this, Michael. I thought I could escape." "But you didn't," Michael shot back, his eyes blazing with emotion. "You built a fortress made of lies, and now the walls are crumbling. We can't let them win." In that clear moment, shades of his life flashed before David's eyes. The laughter, the dreams, and the mistakes. He inhaled sharply. What if they joined forces? What if they turned their pain into power? Silence stretched as the two men locked eyes, a torrent of unspoken words swirling between them. Without warning, Michael broke his gaze, turning back toward the panicking crowd. Through the chaos, people were beginning to murmur, whispers sparking like wildfire. Is Michael the shooter? What really happened? Gripping each other's eyes, they understood. It was now or never. David stepped forward, heart racing. "We need to tell the truth. Expose everything before it's too late." But before they could act, a thunderous voice bellowed from the direction of the police sirens. "Michael, get on the ground!" Panic seized the air, squeezing David's lungs as they both instinctively crouched. "They don't understand!" David shouted, desperation in his tone. "We need to shift the narrative away from violence." In that moment, everything seemed to slow. The sun dipped behind the horizon, casting long shadows across the scene. Michael moved. "Meet me at the alley," he shouted, urgency dripping from every word. David's world shifted again. It was a race against time. Against the judgments of the crowd, against everything he thought he knew. With one last glance at Michael, David dashed through the throngs of bodies, heart pounding, fists clenched. As he moved through the chaos, David began to see not just the fear in the eyes of the crowd, but their anger, their hope, the moments that had defined him. Summoning a feeling he couldn't shake, he skidded to a halt, wheeling around to address the onlookers. "Listen to me! We've all been silenced, ignored. This is the time to stand up for a better truth." Shocked whispers rippled through the crowd. Eyes widening, David took a deep breath, desperation fueling his drive. This isn't just about us anymore. It's about everyone caught in the trap of silence. Suddenly, the weight of Michael's presence returned. He emerged from the darkness, and together they found strength. "You've been overlooked, forgotten. We need to break free from this cycle." The crowd surged forward, understanding dawning on their faces. David felt an unbreakable bond forming, a unity stitched from shared pain and unyielding hope. As the police approached, he knew they'd stand together, rise together. But the moment was not just about redemption. It was a climax of life, a crossroads for both men. Clenching his jaw, David's mind raced. The truth was sharper than he'd let on. But somehow it felt liberating. A countdown to freedom, a glimpse of promise, no matter how dark the past loomed. And just as they stepped forward together, the sirens blared louder, the lights flashing raw and bold. David felt an electric charge, a thrill of danger and potential, knowing this was perhaps the last chance to break free, to reclaim the narrative of their lives. "Let this be a moment to remember," David shouted into the night, and the world felt alive around them, laughing at the darkness. Would this be the end, or the beginning? The answer danced on the horizon, shimmering just out of reach. But before the next breath could unfold, a new gust of wind stirred, a reminder that challenges lay ahead, secrets still waiting to be uncovered. David sensed it, the heartbeat of the world pulsating around him and Michael. In that moment, a deeper truth flickered within him. You have to subscribe now. Don't miss a single moment of this journey. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm. Flood the comments with your reactions and theories about this wild ending. And please, share this video instantly with at least 5 friends who need to witness this gripping conclusion. Your support means the world. Together, we can breathe life into these stories.